Morning, folks. I'm Dave Canterbury with Self-Reliance Outfitters in the Pathfinder School. And what we're going to do this morning in our second box trap project is we're going to build a weasel box. But before we get started, I'd like to tell you a couple things and give you a couple updates. The first one is we have a Black Friday sale, which starts tonight at midnight, that you definitely want to check out at selfrelianceoutfitters.com. The other one is we have a book signing and bushcraft demo event at our retail location on South Emerson Avenue in Indianapolis on December 3rd. And that event will run all day. I'll be signing books, doing some book signings. We'll be doing some demos and just generally talking about different types of bushcraft gear, trapping, whatever you've got on your mind. We can discuss it that day. I'll be there for the entire day. So let's start now by talking about building our weasel box. And our weasel box can use a variety of traps. And that's one of the things I like about this box. It's very versatile. You can use a small trap like a number 1 long spring in there. Works really, really well for these traps. And traditionally, a lot of people used this type trap in this box. You can also use like a number 1 coil spring in here. Or you can use a rat trap. And rat traps are very popular in these type boxes for weasels. But the metal rat traps, like the ones we sell on our website, work exceptionally well for this because they're a very powerful rat trap. They're made out of metal and they have a very large pan on the trap to help set them off. So they work really good in these weasel type boxes, and these are cheaper to buy than a long spring type trap, and really just as effective, if not more, in a box like this. So stay with me and we'll get started. Okay, we're using 1x6 lumber to make our weasel box with, and you can see that this trap is going to fit in there just perfect when we put our boards on the side. And this long spring will lay in there as well, cocked sideways in the trap like this. So they work fine either way. We don't have to have this thing really long. We need enough room for the door. When they jump in, we want them to jump on the trap, so we offset that a little bit, and then we need room for bait in the back. Again, we're not building this off a plan, we're just kind of eyeballing things. So looking at this, an 18-inch long box is probably more than deep enough. A 16-inch long box is probably plenty deep. But we've got a 4-foot piece of wood here. So if we cut 15-inch pieces out of it, we're going to get 30 and have 18 inches left over, but we can cut 3 15-inch pieces out of one piece. So if 15 inches is long enough to get the job done, then 15 inches will give us 3 sides, and all we'll have to have is a top, which is going to have a little overhang on it. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. So let's cut 3 15-inch pieces out of this lumber, and then we'll get started with our assembly. Okay, our last piece when we cut our 3 had 3 inches of overlap, and that's fine. We're going to use that for an awning on our weasel box. So we cut one out of another board that was 15 inches, and that gives us now all 4 sides of our weasel box. So we'll assemble the first 3 sides and we'll leave the top for last because we're going to makeshift a hinge for that part of the box. So we're not doing anything too awful fancy here. Again, the thing about these projects is that it doesn't take fancy materials or fancy tools to get them done. A power saw will get the job of cutting done much faster, but especially with this box, almost everything else can be done with hand tools. We'll use this other piece that we had over here that was scrap, and we will measure how long we've got to make that piece by laying our box on top of it like this, scribing a line and cutting it off. Get that put on. Alright, so we've got the piece cut for the front of our box here, but before we put that on, remember this is the top of the box, a little bit of an overhang, and this is the bottom of the box down here. We want to put a hole in here just about a little off center from the bottom so that the animal can crawl into the trap, and we'll bait it from the back. We'll talk about that in a minute. Cut it right out. Wanted to travel on me a little bit there. Okay, there she goes. Okay, now that we've got our hole cut in here, we can go ahead and attach this, remembering that we want it a little lower to the bottom like this. And this is going to be the bottom. The top's going to have a little bit of an overhang, just like this. Okay, so we'll assemble it like that, and then we'll get to the lid hinge. Okay, now we want this lid to be hinged. And we can create a little makeshift hinge with just a piece of scrap leather. This is just a piece of pigskin. And I'm just going to create a little false piano hinge here. So I'm going to first run a bead of glue along the top of this piece of leather. Just enough to, just like this. Doesn't have to be a real wide swatch of glue there. And I'm going to put that right in the center, just like this. Now, I want to nail that down, so I'm going to take a couple of box nails and I'm going to trim them off so that they're short, just like that. And I'm going to create a set of tacks by doing that, like this. And I'm going to put a couple of those on there. Now all I did here with this hinge is I laid this on the box, folded it over, and just scribed a line where the hinge was going to lay. Now I'm going to come in here with a glue line. Right where that hinge is. Just like this. Pull it down over the top of that. Make sure everything is evened up. Just like that. Kind of hold that in place for a minute until it tacks in a little bit. Then we'll get some nails in there as well. Okay, so we got our strap hinge on the one side there. We cut ourselves another piece of leather so that we could put a strap down hinge on this side. So we'll get this hinge in place first on the top, and then we'll worry about the strapping down part of it. Almost cut that one too short to get a hold of my fingers. Okay, now all we have to do is get that thing down here, put a nail in here, cut a slit in there that's going to pull over the top of that nail, and we've got ourselves a hinged lid. Simple and easy, and we didn't have to buy a hinge to get it done. We're just using scrap. Alright, so we're just going to pull our hinge down on the box, and we're going to just take our chisel here, put a slice in it just like that. That will open up around the nail head. I'm going to get one more of those little box nails out of here. Figure out about where that needs to be. Mark our wood where it needs to be. Just like that. Cut that dude off and nail it in. Okay. One of the things that we want to do probably is we want to put a little bit of an area in here, a shelf or a spacer, so that when we put a trap in here like this, we want something that's going to hold that trap from sliding back into the bait area. It just gives us a little bit of a spacer there, so if the box gets tilted or whatnot, this trap's not going to slide around too much. But we want to make sure that it's long enough as far as the space goes in here for this trap as well. And it will be. As long as it's long enough for this trap, it'll be long enough for this one because they're about the same length. And we want a little bit of offset from the front of this trap back into here. And a lot of guys will put a spacer on both sides of that to keep that thing from moving at all. They'll put one in the front and one in the back. So what we're going to do is, because we're going to use a rat trap in this the majority of the time, I'm going to go ahead and cut two spacers. So there's one spacer, and we'll get it cut off and put in. Okay, so here's what we've got. We've got an entry hole here, and immediately upon getting in this hole, he's going to be pretty close to being on top of this trap, which is exactly what we want. So we just want about an inch or an inch and a half of offset right there. So that once he steps off of this wood, he's going to be on that pan. Now, like I said, you can also put a #1 long spring trap in here as well, if that's the way you choose to use it, or that's what you've got available. So it will work for either a large rat trap or a #1 long spring. Okay folks, well I'm Dave Canterbury with Self-Reliance Outfitters in the Pathfinder School, and I appreciate you joining me today for another in our box trap series on building the weasel box. Now thus far we have built a rabbit live catch box, a weasel box for killing weasels, and tomorrow we're going to build a mink box based around a 110 or 160 conibear trap. I appreciate your views, I appreciate your support, I thank you for everything you do for our school, for our family, and for our business, for all of our sponsors, instructors, affiliates, and friends, and I'll be back with another video as soon as I can. Thanks guys.